2B. One of the important things we need to learn in writing conventions is about commas. So today we're going to talk about that. We've talked about it a bit in class before, especially with friendly letters, and talking about when we might pause when we're reading. But we're going to take a look at 3 specific examples of where we might use commas in our writing and where we might see it in our reading. So the first place is in a series. So when there's sort of a list of things, a series of things you're listing off in a sentence, you'd put a comma between each of those items. Another place you would use a comma is when there's a pause in a sentence. So if you've got a sentence, especially if it's longer and you want the reader to take a little break, you could add a comma there. And then there's one more place that you would want to use a comma in your writing, and that is a letter. So at the greeting, we would put a comma, and at the closure, we would put a comma. There are other places that you will see commas in your reading, but in grade 2, those are the 3 places you need to know about and start using in your writing. So let's take a look at those 3 ways of using commas. First place that we use commas are in a series, so a list of things or a series of things. If there are 3 or more words that you need to list off, then you would put commas in between those. So here they have the example, Jen has a pencil, a book, and a crayon. So if it was just a pencil and a book, you would not need a comma there. But because it's 3 things or more, pencil, book, crayon, that's 3 things, we need commas in between those things. So at the end of the first item, we put a comma. And then at the end of the second item, we put a comma. And then at the end of the last item, we don't need a comma because the list is done. So a pencil, comma, a book, comma, and a crayon. So we do put a comma before the and. You may have teachers in the future who don't use that last comma. It's called an Oxford comma, but we will use that in grade 2. So I'll get you to do a comma between all of those items and just not after the last one. Often after the last one, there would be a period or different punctuation. So let's take a look at some examples. Here are some examples of correct uses of commas in a series. So Jim can run, jump, and hop. So we have 3 or more things. So we would go Jim can run, comma, jump, comma, and hop. Here's another correct example. The dog will eat, lick, and play. So we have 3 or more things. So we would go the dog will eat, comma, lick, comma, and play. And those commas are spots where I would pause. So I won't tell you where the comma is as I read this now, but listen for where I pause at that comma. The dog will eat, lick, and play. So a comma means a pause. That's where I would pause when I'm reading the sentence. In this sentence here, again, this is a correct use of the comma in a series. Molly will buy milk, apples, and bread. So I've got the commas after milk and apples. Here are some examples where I have not used the comma correctly. So Lucy can twirl, dance, and skip. So here I've forgotten my last comma. I should have twirl, comma, dance, comma, and skip. So I've forgotten a comma here. Here I've put my comma in the wrong spot. Mike has a pen, crayons, and glue. Has is not one of the things in the list. A pen is one of the things in the list. So I should have moved that comma there over to after pen. Now we've got this one. The cat will drink, lick, and scratch. And this one here is a problem because I've forgotten the comma after drink. There should be a comma right there. The cat will drink, comma, lick, comma, and scratch. So I've forgotten a comma there. So that's one place we would use commas in our writing and where we might recognize them in our reading. Another place we use commas is in letters, and there are 2 important places that we would use commas in friendly letters. The first place is at the greeting. So dear grandma, comma, and that's sort of a pause. So I would just do a comma there. It's not really a full sentence, dear grandma. So we call that the greeting and we add a comma afterwards. And then we also put a comma at the closure. So here we have love, comma, Leah. Like we've talked about in class, I could also put yours truly, sincerely. Any closure like that needs to have a comma after it. Let's look at a few more letters. So here we have dear Tyler, and we've got a comma right after the Tyler. And at the closure here,
we have a comma after your friends. That's the closure. Your friends, LaShawn and Leah. So you've got a comma right there. Here's another example of a letter to Miss Robbins. So at the greeting, we have Dear Miss Robbins, comma, so I would pause there. And then at the closure, we have a comma right here. Sincerely, comma, Leah Dunway. We're going to look at another place we would use commas, which is when we're writing or reading and we want to pause in a sentence. So it might be in a sentence that's a bit longer, where you need a pause between sort of two ideas or two parts of the sentence. So let's look at this book, The Way Home in the Night. I'm going to be reading you parts of this book from Akiko Miyakoshi, and I'm reading it with permission from Kids Can Press. We'll look at a few pages where the author has included commas to show where we pause. So this page says, on our way home, we see the restaurant and bookshop closing for the night. And you can see right here, they have a comma after home. So instead of going, on our way home, we see the restaurant and bookshop closing for the night, I would pause instead. So it would go, on our way home, we see the restaurant and bookshop closing for the night. So that comma shows us where to pause. And then on this page here, there's a sentence that goes, when we are almost home, there's a comma, my father joins us. Soon he will tuck me into bed. Then here on this page again, there's a sentence that has a comma. Snug under my covers, I think about the way home. Are the party guests saying goodnight? So that comma helps me to sort of make sense of that sentence. Without it, snug under my covers, I think about the way home. That sentence doesn't sound as fluent and it doesn't make as clear sense as if I pause. Snug under my covers, I think about the way home. And then here's the last page that has a comma. But every night, and we've got this little pause here, we all go home to bed. And then there's one last page without a comma, but it's a nice ending to the story. Good night.
So grade 2s, you are all set now to use some commas in your writing. In your writing activity this week, when you're writing your diary entries, I'd like you to try to use at least 2 commas. And you can use it in one of those 3 ways we talked about in the video. So try to find a spot to include those commas to show me you sort of understand where you can use commas in your writing. And then in your reading this week as well, you can watch for all the different places you find commas. Have fun reading, grade 2s. Bye!